Hi, everyone. This is Chris West,
And Jim Bradley.
and we are House Calls Vermont. Welcome to our most recent episode. This is episode 3 of our live YouTube show. And today we're going to be getting calls. If you guys have a question yourselves, you can call us at 802-200-2550, and we'll take that call. But today we're going to be discussing specifically the materials cost increase and how that's why it is, and how that's affecting builds in Vermont. We're also going to be getting an update. I'm doing an deep energy retrofit at a house at 10 Old Stage in Essex, Vermont, and we're going to have a weekly update on what's going on with that. And so we'll be taking about a 10-minute report from what's going on there right now, and we'll talk about the building science of the choices that I've been making as we go along. And after that, we have, and Jim and I did an interview with Darren Macri. He's one of the co-owners of Wythe Windows. So that's what we've got on the schedule today. Like for the first 40 minutes, we'll be chatting about materials costs and taking your calls. And at about 10 to 8, we'll throw over to the report I put in about 10 old, and then we'll listen to Darren's interview. So Jim, why don't you start us off? You'd have to actually be like under a rock right now not to know that there's something kind of wonky going on with building material prices. The price of sheet goods, and by that I mean plywood and OSB. 2 years ago, a sheet of half-inch OSB was $10 a sheet,
Or less.
or less, and
Yeah.
now we're up to $40
No,
a sheet
no. As of today, $62.30 before taxes delivered to the supplier without a markup. So
without a markup.
that's our supplier's cost.
So we're looking at, and they have a markup of whatever, 10, 20, 30% for wholesale. So we're looking at prices. Now there's one metric that I've been hearing a lot of. You heard Dennis from the home builders. He's the president, and he's constantly tracking these things. And he's been talking about prices per thousand board feet.
Yes.
And so that's a way of looking at all different types of sheet good, but also dimensional lumber. So when we're talking about a board foot is 12 inches by 12 inches by 1 inch. That's the classic definition of a board foot. So we started out last year, I believe we were in the
$348 a thousand board feet with per unit cost, and that was as of April last year. And within 12 months, a little over 12 months, we had topped out at $1,680, so $1,680. Today we closed at right around $1,500, a little under $1,500 a thousand board feet. But you can look at that. That's almost 5 times more, 500% more expensive than it was even last year in April. So that's a significantly large increase, greater than the standard inflation index. And so the building materials are really taking a pretty hard hit right now.
And this is having a really negative effect on housing prices. We have an entire country that is dependent in part on housing starts and new construction, renovations, and
Sure.
all these things. So a house right now that is being built at, what did you say, $1,700 a thousand board feet, or 1,200?
It had gotten up that high. Now it's down to around a little under $1,500 a board feet, and the futures are tracking. When I say futures, into the future, even into late summer, they're tracking pretty close to that. So we're not seeing a relief in sight right now. What that does translate into, though, for a standard single family home under maybe around 2,000 square feet, they're estimating, I think this is a conservative estimate on a national level, because each economy is a little bit different, nationwide per state, is about $36,000 in additional cost to a single family home. We're seeing here, I've seen that personally in Vermont, that you're seeing $50,000, $75,000 in additional cost, depending on the size of the house, which is hard to absorb by the builder, of course, by the homeowner. Part of what we've been doing is putting material cost escalation clauses in our contract to protect the builder, but also to make the customer aware that this is going on. We've told some customers, you may want to rethink this and build next year, and hoping that prices go down significantly. But when you get down to it, you got to make sure that when you're building a home, if you're building on spec as a builder, you're really taking a chance right now, because you could be left holding the bag on the other end of this if the market does drop and you bought it the high side, or if you bought the low side and now you're trying to build at the high side. And as a homeowner, if you get into this and you have a build that's more than 3 months, let's say it's a year-long process, or maybe a little bit more depending on the size of the home, you could really be getting into a situation where at the end of this, you could be stuck with the bill that you don't want to receive.
Yeah,
so
we're looking at houses that are there was this term that came up during the 2008 crisis, underwater, right? Where the house is not valued at what what your mortgage is. And that was because of, nefarious lending practices by large lenders and mortgage lenders. This is not that. This is an industry that can't stop building, because then we'd have all these people out of work.
Not just from the builder, but to the person selling the lunch to the builder, to the person making the clothes.
The entire economy around building is taking a hit. And there was a report out just last week that housing starts are down 16% this month as compared to last month. And it's completely being driven by this, because we know that there's a huge need, especially in places like Vermont, which is a destination, right? People are no longer needing to necessarily work in the same city as they live. They can live just about anywhere, and we're finding out that that's a new reality. And part of that new reality is we have people with large piles of money, which is not big money in the city, but is big money in a place like Vermont or upstate New York or parts of New Hampshire, and they are happy to go into a bidding war and spend 30, 40, 50, $60,000. I mean, up to 10% more than what the building is actually.
Good example. Right now, a single family home in the state of Vermont, and we do have one of the highest, if not the highest, mortgage cost for the entire state when you compare it to the other 50 states. Not something you want to be number one in. But I was talking to one of the realtors for a simple single family home that's not the best of conditions or condition. You could be looking at starting asking price of $450,000, $475,000. And like I said, this is not a well-appointed home. This could be a simple ranch or something that's dated and needs a lot of work.
And a code, right? This is just houses on the market. So you and I both live in a house. I think each of our houses is worth, I don't know, yours may be worth a bit more than mine. I think my house is grand listed at $320,000. I could probably sell this house for $450,000.
Well,
I mean, I wouldn't have a place to live.
You got to go buy again. And the reality for me as a builder, I could not afford to rebuild the house I live in currently, just because it would be too expensive. But going back to the point about the cost of the house, so you list this at $450,000 for this simple single family home. It goes into the bidding war that Chris discussed, and it can easily get 20 offers in a couple of days, and the price increases by more than $100,000. Some of the realtors that we deal with in the Vermont Builders and Remodelers Association are basically saying that this is what's happening. So it's a frenzied market. No one wants to be left behind, apparently. I've likened it to the metaphor. Just had this picture when I was thinking about all these different items in the last couple of months. It's this out of control train going down the tracks, barreling to a destination, and yet there's the client on the side of the train with a car that has a pedal down and says, I'm going to cross in front of this train and get what I want. The problem is,
how many movies do I have? There's got to be at least 2 Steve McQueen movies where where that happens.
Yeah. But the thing is, that's not the solution. The solution really is, and as a builder, I'm saying this, as a business owner, I'm saying this, is take the foot off the gas. I mean, if there's a compelling reason, a durability issue, a health and safety issue that says, I really need to do work on my house, or I now have to work from home and I have to, build that home office, or at least appoint it appropriately. That could be a compelling reason. Or if you do have a bunch of money lying around and you want to invest and keep people employed, that could be a reason. But if it's time to rethink things and maybe say, okay, maybe I don't build as big, maybe I don't make the remodel as ostentatious, and maybe I take just a step back, wait a little bit, let things cool down. Some of the people I was listening to recently, even the chemicals market, and you say, well, this is a building industry. Why are the chemical market, why is that important? Because
Here
so
we see the fingers of the chemical industry in the materials.
exactly, they're
Yeah.
everywhere. I
Yeah.
mean, even making your sheetrock mud bucket out of petrochemicals, you need that. I mean, but they're saying what we need is at this point in time is a 4-month halt on the demand that's here just to get caught up. So understand that factories are being allocated. What's a better word for allocated? They are being rationed the different raw materials that they can use to make their products because they're in such high demand.
Yeah.
And so they can only get so much out the door. And that's just keeping things this hyper accelerated, hyper elevated price point. And to take a step back and give that breathing room would help things overall. Lumber companies, they can't keep up. The mills, they can't keep up just because the demand doesn't stop. Getting workers, everything is really connected to all this. So let's just take a step back here and really kind of say, where are we currently? Well, as we all know, mortgage rates are historically low for right now compared
very,
to
very low
where they have been. Fuel costs are still relatively low. We see them inching up here and there.
I'm almost at $3 a gallon here
exactly.
locally, right? Which is, I mean, the last 2 years it's been hovering around between 260 and 285. So it's still relatively cheap compared to, I don't know, say 2013, 2014 when we were pushing $4 a gallon.
Yep. And with that, worldwide demand is outstripping the supply chain. So it's not just a North American issue. This is worldwide, from the growth in China to the needs in Europe to other emerging countries. You see that there's a huge increase in building, and the population continues to increase. Let alone in the United States alone, there's a 4 million housing unit deficit. That means we need 4 million new housing units to meet the needs of our population. Right. And we don't have that. So that's part of what's driving this. But where prices are really being increased, or that some of the other factors are causing the increase, one of them is the easiest one, is transportation. I mean, before this whole uptick happened, we were still lamenting the fact that just getting drivers for moving companies, drivers for commodity deliveries or material deliveries, was just even a delivery driver for a truck that was bringing your lumber goods to the site was
I'm
really
seeing a lot of road signs saying, you know, commercial driver's license start immediately all over the place. So yeah, that's definitely true.
And so that's had part of it. In fact, there are some truckers. I just heard this today. I mean, this stuff it's out there. It's part of the discussion now. But a builder that I was talking to up in St. Albans had mentioned that he had a trip down to Virginia recently, in this last week. And going down there, he saw on the truck stops that there were trailers, for tractor trailers, that were parked with no rig attached, and they were full of lumber, but they weren't going anywhere. So he says, I got to pull over. I got to find out what's going on here. And this was not just an anecdotal.
You're talking just the trailer, not the tractor.
Just the trailer full of lumber. And so he started asking the guys, and he said, listen, the perishable goods market, produce, food, that type of thing, are paying so much more for their delivery services. They're going that direction. And so you do have more materials that are actually processed, ready to be used, but are sitting idle. And yet we can't get enough drivers out there. One driver we know that was getting to go cross country was getting $7 a mile to go back and forth. So that's just one way. That's a pretty huge price tag right there, $28,000. That's big. But there's other factors involved too, just a shipping container. So even though we're talking about building material price increases, there's also so many interwoven connecting points of other items that are putting stresses on that supply chain as we go forward here. Part of which is the shipping industry from overseas to the United States, where at a moment's notice, you can go ahead and push the button and say, I want that from Amazon, or I need that bit of exercise equipment, or I want the new office setup because I'm maybe working from home, or I'm just bored and I'm going to buy this. That adds to the strain. And now the shipping companies that are coming over largely from, many of the Asian countries, that just to get one of those shipping containers, it used to only cost you $1,600. And now those are $8,000. So that's just to get that container here before it ever gets to the truck. Problem is that when it gets to one of the largest ports in America, which is out of Los Angeles, They have all the dock workers working round the clock, processing over 1 million of those shipping containers a month. And they still can't keep up, and you have ships waiting offshore. So that's being held up. But then once they get here, what's the next problem? The trucking companies, once again, because for each truck that is available for shipping, they actually have 96 plus possible loads to transport. You can't be at 96 one place, 96 points, at one time. And so something's going to suffer, something's going to give. And usually that's why it's going to the highest bidder. So they'll pay more for shipping because they want their goods to go to that destination point.
And all of these things are affecting the flow of materials for the building industry, and why we're seeing huge increases in prices. Although I was looking the other day on the interweb at the profits for the large lumber mill companies, and these companies are all showing profits of 150, 250%. And it reminds me of the energy crisis back in the 1970s. Jim and I, we were both children at that point. I was a slightly older child, because I'm slightly older than Jim. But I remember very clearly finding it very odd that during this energy crisis, when there wasn't very much oil, that Exxon, Mobil, which were separate companies at that time, and the other large companies were showing profits of 5, 6, 700%. So it wasn't just a scarcity. There's something else going on there. There's something going on the company side, where they're saying, okay, we have a cornered market, and we're going to take advantage of that cornered market. Which
now to give a little coverage to the lumber mills, not saying that they are correct in the huge profits, but we also have to look at some of the historic side of things as well, because it would be easy to point at the lumber mills and say, well, geez, you need to get more ships, you need to process more, whatever, you need to do this, that, and the other. There's so many other connected factors to the market, because a lot of times when people say lumber mills, what are they thinking? You're going to get me a 2x4, you're going to get me a piece of plywood. But the thing is, there's so many other items that these mills process for so many other types of products that are cellulose based. That could be something like some of the engineered lumber products. It could be
like an OSB, yeah.
Yep, like OSB or TJIs. It could be the residuals that they're basically the leavings after the process, the sawdust types of chips. It could be another product that they're using for shipping containers, just for across the nation. But also some of these new companies, there's one in Maine that's opening up that's going to be using some of those residual products for insulation and other items, which is an exciting thing. But this is where some of these companies are retooling. But people would say, well, just build more lumber mills. Okay, so right now we're at the peak, we're at the pinnacle, we hope, of the whole housing boom right now, because we
and
can't.
The price out of whackness.
And yes, exactly. That's the concern. We can keep building these units, but with the price being so elevated, that's the big concern. But so you can say, well, just build a new plant. It takes 2 to 3 years to build one of these lumber mills, and get them up and running. But then you've got to find the workers, because if you can't find enough workers to drive the trucks for the products, you can't find enough workers to actually work in the sawmills. And so, and they're paying well. It's not like it's a substandard job by any means. It's a skilled job. If you've ever seen one of these high-tech sawmills with all that they use for the computers and lasers and the saws and everything else, it's an amazing process.
Highly automated. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, exactly. And so with that, it's an excellent skill trade, but it's just hard to find workers. So let's say you want to tell that mill owner, you better start doing two shifts a day or 3 shifts a day. The problem is those factories need maintenance, and so they're going to have to shut down at times, which then puts a stress on the market. But also when you're running at these high capacities, you think, okay, look, I got all this raw lumber processed. Well, then you got to find kiln space to dry the product, because if you don't have kiln space, you're going to have wasted materials, and it's going to cause warping and other problems with the lumber that you just processed. So there's a lot of factors there involved at the same time. Right now, it's a buyer's market for logs too. There's actually a glut. I mean, this is the thing is kind of ironic and doesn't make sense.
So we can identify the bottleneck. The bottleneck right now is among, definitely transportation and other things, is the mills. And COVID being around and shutting down the Canadian border hasn't helped, because a lot of our lumber, especially for the northern part of the country, comes from Canada. And we've had some serious changes in availability of trusses and other types of things that we, buy from Canada. This brings me back to what we discussed with Ward 2 weeks ago about the contraction of the available mill capacity in 2008, 2009. And that some of the companies are now saying, well, we'll invest $100 million in building a new mill. However, it's going to take, like you said, 2 or 3 years to build the mill. So it won't be something that will help alleviate this particular situation.
Well, let's go into some of the historic side of this, just for the lumber side, because I still want to get into steel prices and copper prices, because this some of the unintended consequences of trying to make a better environment and move forward brings us to those other discussions. But historically, for the lumber industry, this is not an overnight problem. It seems like it's overnight. It's more so this last year, 2020, with everything that was happening, it kind of just took the blanket off and uncovered everything that was there, that wasn't operating well, that was just kind of being sustained.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going. The system just kind of evolved, socially in the last 150 years, right? And no one sat down and planned this. And what it's showing is the weaknesses of the system that we have, right? We're seeing it burst at the seams in some places.
Yep. And so, historically, if you go back to the early 2000s, there was a beetle. It was a ponderosa pine boring beetle that was heavily found in British Columbia and Canada. And it was just destroying, not decimating, taking 1 out of every 10 trees, but it was decimating, or it was destroying the entire forest and killing all the trees. The good part about that was there was still a 5 to 10 year window of opportunity to harvest those trees and still use them for lumber. So there was still an opportunity to use that resource. The problem is, since everything was not sustainably harvested, it was all one and done.
Yeah.
And then you had to wait for all these trees to regrow. So their supply side in Canada really dropped. So they weren't able to export as much. Then the tariffs started rising, especially during the first year of the previous administration. It really increased things. One project alone for the company I work for, we lost $20,000 on one project in the first month of those tariffs, just because the prices skyrocketed.
Right.
So it was a huge blow there. But when the Canada kept seeing this, that they had dwindling supply, they were getting a lot more tariffs and everything else, they finally said, well, if you can't beat them, join them. So they systematically have gone throughout the country and bought up many of the sawmills, especially the mom and pop type sawmill. They give them a great price, and then they start using them for something else. They'll either shutter them to use later. They'll shut them down and tear them down so that they don't have to maintain them, and you won't be able to get things as cheaply. Or they'll repurpose them for another use, like one of those residual products. And so you're not necessarily getting those items that you're looking for with respect to the lumber and the sheathing goods.
Yeah.
The one thing that's interesting too is when we get into the housing bust of 2007, 2008, we were actually producing right around 2 million housing units a year. So things were really elevated at that point in time, because a lot of people were buying on speculation too, that they could just buy something and flip it. So not that many people were actually taking up those residences. Then shortly thereafter, the bust, there was only about 600,000 units being built annually in the nation. Now we have a demand that's easily at 1.7 million and growing in our country. And so, but our manufacturing during the 2007, 2008 bust shuttered and shut down and tore down a lot of these mills. So when capacity started back up, or the demand started back up, the capacity wasn't there. And so people can't catch up in time. Yeah. Then when you look at the fall of 2019, we started to see a little bit of a drop in the actual demand on the housing side. A lot of that was seasonal because you're heading into winter, but some of it was, there was a little bit of a downturn. But then when you headed into the first quarter 2020, you started seeing some of these national shutdowns of all operations of business. And these factories then were shutting down as well. And a lot of the manufacturers in many industries, not just the building industry, were betting on at least a 20% downturn minimum from what they had experienced the prior quarter. So they weren't ramping up. They were actually saying, okay, we'll be shut down. Demand's not going to be there. We'll rest upon some of the stock that we have already built up and send that out. And then all of a sudden, the demand didn't drop. it skyrocketed. I mean, you talk about going 180-degree turn in the opposite direction. This was a 180% increase over what was there before. So we're now much greater in demand than where we were before. And once again, that came from demand, not just in building projects by the professional builder, but also a lot of homeowners started saying, well, I'm at home, I got nothing to do. Let me start doing that deck. Let me put that addition on, build that shed, repaint this, you know,
Stuck at home, do it yourself explosion.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then once again, people were doing the home office fit ups, the Amazon boredom relief syndrome. And then also what happened, there was a lot of political unrest during that 2020 year. And so people saw a lot of rioting and everything else. And I'm not getting into anything, but yet the reality that people said, you know what, I don't need to live in the city. And now that I'm working from home, I find out I can work remotely without having to go to the big skyscraper in the city. So I can go to Vermont where it's really picturesque and buy a house.
Yeah, and that's what we were speaking about before. This is an exodus from urban centers with money that is a reasonable amount of money if you're living in a city where cities can be expensive, right? Especially some of the more affluent parts of New York City and Boston, Providence, etc. And when we have that kind of money coming into a state where we already have problems getting our youth having affordable places to live, where we have workforce that we're trying to develop here, those workforce jobs are not going to be the types of jobs that can afford a 10% premium on top of what was already unaffordable to begin with. So this is a really big problem socially overall for Vermonters and for people who want to come live and work in Vermont who are not working remotely from well-paying jobs in big firms.
So, not only were people moving out of the city and wanting to go ahead and start either buying up existing housing stock or renovating that once they do. I mean, so many of these were bought sight unseen. They saw an ad on the internet and said, I want that house, but you haven't seen it. I want it. I'm going to give you a full price offer and more. And all this existing housing stock was being purchased. And great, people were able to sell their homes. But at the same time, people were looking to build. And so all these developments were selling their houses before they were even built, for sure. And that just continued to ramp that up. But then we started having outbreaks in some of these manufacturing facilities. In fact, many of them. Then we had a few plant fires. And
talking about COVID outbreaks,
COVID outbreaks. So yes, we had some of those that were shutting things down. And then when can you restart back up? And once you shut something down and have to restart it back up, you've lost some momentum. And that's going to take a while to get it back online. And then you had a fire at a major John Mansfield insulation manufacturer in New Jersey that cut into the supply chain as well. And then once again, we got to that whole thing of once you've got all these factories working at their peak capacity almost, they're going to need maintenance. Otherwise, they'll break down and stay shut down for a very long time. But then came a real surprise. Once again, we're going to the chemicals that are used in our industry to manufacture a lot of our goods, from the building industry, but also to just the whole supply chain that we deal with in our world, is going to be the Texas storm in February, the winter storm that surprised everybody, and it shut down 150 petrochemical processing plants. And that makes anything from plastics to resins to whatever. I mean, they're used in everything. And that they still, even though I believe most all of them are back up and running, they weren't even as of April. I mean, there were still many of them that were still shut down, but now they are back up and running. But you just lost several months worth of the production cycle when everything was, exploding or emerging in spring to start the whole building process again. And we haven't even gotten into summer yet. So that's some of the big concerns that we have is we see where we are now. Where are we going to be in a month or two from now, for sure?
Yeah, and we're hearing it from our builder members at the Home Builders Association, the VBRA, the Vermont Home Builders Remodelers Association. We're hearing it on a regular basis that they're busy as heck. They're booked into spring of 2022, and putting houses, starts right now. Dennis Borbo was talking about he had 4 starts this week where he's putting 4 houses in the ground. And to protect himself against changes in lumber, he's buying all of the lumber up front. at whatever the price is. So if the price goes up, he's protected, but the price goes down, that's where we start getting that underwater owner.
And you're selling it short, basically. You're
Yeah,
buying it high,
exactly.
buying it
Yeah.
long, selling it short, because that's a lot of the risks that these builders are going to have. And that's where we're wondering, okay, where's the pushback going to be? And it might end up being first from the builders themselves saying, we reject your pricing, or pricing rejection, as it's called. We're hoping this is not a crash. We're hoping it's a correction, but this can't be sustained forever. Many have speculated that these higher prices, now that they're more recognized in the market, we're not going to go back to seeing OSB at $10, $9 a sheet unless there's a major crash and the housing market just isn't building at all. But that's a much more significant issue.
Yeah.
We'd rather a soft landing and realize that as shingles did back in 2007, because I have personal experience with this. I bought shingles, asphalt shingles. A bundle of shingles was costing at that point in time right at $16.40 a bundle. Then as soon as 2008 hit, they ramped back up, especially with all the asphalt jobs that were coming with roads and bridges being refurbished. A lot of things would happen. What happened is that contributed to the cost of those shingles doubling in price, and sometimes a little bit more. And they have since gone back down, but only a few dollars. So instead of $16.40, they went up to $34 a bundle and more.
Right.
Now they were back down to $28, $29, and they're back up to $32 a bundle. So we never really got back down to where we were. And I think we're probably going to experience a fair amount of that in this situation, but hopefully not as drastic of a 600% increase on cost of goods. Some will say it's only a 180% increase, but pick your item. I mean, because 2x4s being originally at $1.96 each, now over $8 each for an 8-foot 2x4. That's a pretty significant increase.
That's really significant.
Yeah.
And we as an industry can't sustain that because we cannot continue. So one of two things can happen. This is something that I remember very clearly from when housing made a huge jump in the mid 1980s, right? We had houses, these houses were worth $20,000, $30,000. And then we had a huge influx in two-family earners. So we had two breadwinners in a family, and they could afford that house being an $80,000 house. And suddenly a house that 3 months before that was a $20,000 house is now being bought at $80,000, and we never went back down.
Exactly.
And I don't think that that the country and the industry can afford that, because it just exacerbates the income disparity that we're already suffering from, that we need to address as a country. And that's a very difficult discussion, of course, but we can't have a haves and a have-nots in the way that we are looking at now. We can't say we want people to stay in a rural state like Vermont, or to move here and do the work that we need done, but not have housing available for them that is safe and something that is a good investment or rental or whatever. We've got to address that.
And some of the concerns, and once again, that selling short, that I have, and not just for your lumber suppliers, but your builders and everyone who's trying to invest in this. You're trying to use some kind of foresight and say, okay, I'm like, if I'm a supplier, I'm going to try to buy a bunch of product, keep it in my warehouse, and I'll have supply. But if you're buying that OSB at $70 a sheet, and all of a sudden there's a huge correction in the market and it drops down to $30 a sheet, and you're still left with a warehouse full of it, you may be out of business. As a builder, if you're building on spec where you have a development and you're pre-selling your homes now because you have business till 2022 and beyond, and you're real excited about that, I get it. As a builder, that's exciting.
Yeah.
But because of this hyper accelerated market we're in, it's unsustainable. And so you're actually selling a house today at current market prices for materials, because you hopefully adjusted those to make those corrections. You're still not selling them at prices from a year ago for what it costs to build material wise. But you've made those adjustments, but then all of a sudden here comes a correction, whether it be a year or two from now. And that what you sold then at a higher price, you're not going to be able to get that out of it. And once again, that's what Chris was saying, it's going to be underwater. But as a builder, you could really be left, holding the bag and then being out of business as well. So
because if you're building spec houses, then you're putting it up front. And if that house is unsellable,
even if you get into a year-long build with a customer, let's say they have a construction loan and they go to get it appraised at the end. You know, a lot of appraisals are being done up front, but let's say you're in a state where they're doing appraisals at the end, and you come to find out that the market doesn't bear that and you can't get a loan for that amount. The one thing that I'm really dismayed by is, you know,
Oh, you mean a final mortgage to take over
yeah, the
on
final
the
mortgage to take
construction,
over.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, because here's some of the delays too. Dennis Bourbeau alluded to this earlier, is that some of these mortgages that are out there now, the construction loans. So you get a construction loan if you're going to finance your house. You plan on building a home, you want to get started, but you don't have a marketable commodity that you can say, give me this much to build a home, $400,000, let's say. And if you default, all you have is a piece of property and no home. So what you do is you get a construction loan. That'll help supply the needs of the build until you actually have a marketable commodity once that house is built on that piece of property. Then you'll refinance to a traditional mortgage.
And construction loans are usually at a higher interest rate.
Oh,
They don't
definitely.
want you having it for a long time. This is a short-term loan.
Exactly. It's a term. And that term will say you have X amount of days or months or weeks or whatever to build a home. And let's say we're experiencing right now, there's several people that are 100% financed to build a home, but they can only get 80% of their products. I have one customer who ordered a Bosch induction range back in November, trying to be proactive, that is now delayed till October of this coming year. So if you can't finish the home, I told him, I said, you're probably gonna have to go find a used one and put it in place temporarily.
Yeah, just to get the transfer from the construction loan over to the regular mortgage.
Traditional mortgage, yeah. So you have to have a complete home. You can't have parts and pieces like the window's not in because they're, well, Mr. Banker, I'm 6 months out before I get windows. Can you please, convert this into a traditional mortgage? They're not going to do it.
Bankers are well known for being understanding to that. No, I'm being sorry.
It's just part of the process. I mean,
of course they don't. It's all about risk, and I'm not blaming the bankers.
Sure.
They need to protect their investors and make sure that they're not going to have to take a hit on that particular investment because it didn't pan out.
But where I do see a bit of concern, and I'm concerned about going back to what was happening and what precipitated the crisis in 2007, 2008, was it was a little bit different process of over financing something.
Yeah.
But now what we're seeing is, because the thought occurred to me as well, is, okay, you got to make sure that your customer has the money, the finances to support the build for a new home or renovation. But what if prices skyrocket and they don't? So then you have to say, okay, you need to have 100% of the cost of the project and some more. And so whether that's 10%, 20%, 30% to cover these potential cost increases. I mean, change orders happen in almost every job because a customer will change their mind or hidden conditions or something like that. But when you're looking at the only thing that you can't control is material price increase, no matter how diligent you are to watch pricing and secure commodities and materials when you can at the right time, there's still going to be the unknown. And so if that's there and you don't have enough to cover the end, then that builder doesn't get paid. Well, let's look at the banker's side. They're now actually letting loans go forward. And this goes right back to what Chris was saying about things being underwater. Your mortgage being underwater from day one, is that you may get financing for not 100% of the build, but I think it's usually 80 to 90% of the build, depending on your down payment that you place. But then they're going to want to make sure you have assets in place to cover the eventuality of that material price increase. The unfortunate part about it is appraisers aren't finding comps at this higher level.
Comps.
Yeah, so your appraised, comparable prices for homes. So your comps aren't going to justify your price increase that it costs you to build your new home, and so you're not going to have that value in it unless everything else gets elevated at the same time.
That's the point. Are we? That's why I brought up the 1980s bump with the two breadwinners, because that never went back down. The banking industry said, we have got a lot of mortgages out there. And I've even gotten some emails. I don't know if you've gotten these, Jim, but I've gotten a couple of emails from mortgage lenders saying, your house may be worth more than you thought. And this is one of the reasons why, because they'd love to see an elevation. But that's what causes inflation. Inflation is caused by assigning things a value where the value isn't fundamentally there. And that's one of the things we
Yeah.
have to look at and be careful.
Well,
So we're coming up on that 45-minute mark. We've got a couple of more minutes before we're gonna
sure.
jump over to the first episode or the first report from 10 Old Stage. But you have a couple of closing statements you'd like to make. You put together a list here, and the list includes solutions. Where do we go from here? So why don't you tell us what you've gotten as far as ideas for solutions?
Sure. And with that, I would just want to also just go right back to the other thing where we talked about the unknown cost. When you even get into the insurance side of things, and this occurred to me the other day as I was rethinking my homeowner's
Oh, right, you
insurance.
have to insure a home for a certain amount, right?
Yeah. So if I had, let's say I had a $300,000 home, but I had a $400,000 policy, but to rebuild that home is now $600,000, I'm underinsured. So definitely when you have that annual revisiting cycle with your insurance provider, have that discussion and make sure you're covered, so you don't think, oh, at least I had insurance, and you find out you're not covered. That's another big thing too.
Not covered
But
enough to replace in kind, right?
exactly.
The same building. Yep.
So some of the solutions, I mean, basically there's not a magic wand here, or for some, after going through some of these stressful opportunities or hurdles during this whole time of material shortages and still be, trying to be profitable in the building industry, you may want to go for mother's little helper in the cupboard to help assuage some of your feelings. But nothing's going to immediately resolve these issues. What is important is not to panic, not to wring your hands, not to get overly stressed, not to have a coronary, that type of thing. Take a deep breath and don't try to outrun that out of control train that's barreling down the tracks. No matter how fast you think your car can go, you're going to try to get ahead of it. Ease off the gas. Realize that what's coming is a price rejection or price correction. Builders will probably start it, but homeowners are finally starting to say, we're not paying for this, even as Chris alluded to. We've already seen a 16% decrease from March to April of new housing starts because of this. So there's some of the things to consider. If you're still looking to move forward, whether it's because you need to, durability issue once again on the building,
or you just can't wait.
You just can't wait. Try to source other materials, because there are other source materials out there that you can go with that could actually end up being more durable, and where they at one time may have been out of reach financially, may be within reach, and they'll last longer. So be smart about your product sourcing, and just don't go for the regular code issues or code compliance stuff that would satisfy your requirements.
Right. So if you want to build a house, give me a call. I have a portable sawmill. If you have enough lumber in your forest, we'll come and we'll saw it up, and you just leave it out there to dry and air dry it for 6 months or so, and then start building next spring.
Yep. And granted, that is, people are now starting to do that. And so I think it's a great opportunity there. But also look for what we did at Chris's house when we did a major gut retrofit. Chris went on the web and found repurposed polyisocyanurate insulation that we used on the exterior of his home. So instead of filling up the landfill with all this plastic, he's able to benefit from that product at a much reduced price and use that on his home. And so that's another way to be creative in this.
Yeah.
The one last thing I'd admonish you in is try to stop clicking the add items to my cart button in Amazon or whatever, Walmart, and just ease the demand from the supply chain as much as possible. And hopefully that will be enough to go ahead and allow things to relax and people to get caught back up and get things moving in the right direction.
So we've been trained by the consumer culture to desperately want something and have it now. In the 1920s, right now. In the 1920s, there's a great show on PBS about the history of advertising. In the 1920s, advertisers discovered psychology, Freud basically, but other psychologists after Freud, who were able to discern some of our most basic psychological desires. And so we have been manipulated perfectly happily for the last 100 years into wanting something and getting it as soon as we want it. And this is a good moment to try to step away from the Coke addict response.
Well, yeah, exactly. Because hey, everyone else will be frenzied. Everyone else will be super excited. and concerned and stressed and everything else. You don't have to be. That's the biggest thing. Take a step back, take a breath, and step away from the car, ma'am.
Step away. Okay, well, fascinating discussion, Jim. I did want to point out that on the radio, we would about this time we would have our friend Steve Spatz from Efficiency Vermont jump on and discuss what's going on with various programs at Efficiency Vermont, how they're changing based on new legislation, the new S109, that weatherization bill did pass, and that's going to be changing some things.
It didn't pass, but the provisions got melded into another budgetary funding mechanism. So yes, the monies will be there.
Okay.
But it's not the S109. But
okay, so a kind of an addendum to it, but there will be money there. A lot of this is federal money. The state is getting something like $1.2 billion in federal money. And so next week and every week after that, we will be hosting our friend Steve Spatz from Efficiency Vermont, or some other representative from Efficiency Vermont, as we feel the need. So stay tuned for that. This week we're going to be having an interview or giving our interview with Darren Macri, the co-owner of Wythe Windows, and we have a number of very interesting interviews coming up in the near future. We're in discussions with Mark Corviello of SIGA to do an interview about SIGA membranes and tapes. We've got Dave Carroll, what's his name, Jim?
Yeah, Dave Carroll with Rice Lumber.
With Rice Lumber to come on and actually talk more about this particular topic. Sure. And we've got our fingers out. We're having an interview with Scott Dion, who's one of the marketing people for that Timber HP, which is that factory that used to be a paper factory up in Maine. Yep. That's going to be producing that Gutex-like material. This is a wood-based wax impregnated insulation material, both loose fill and rigid board. So there's a lot of very interesting interviews coming up. But right now, we're going to have our first report out of a series of reports from me on the renovations at 10 Old Stage. So let's take a look at that, and we'll be right back after that. Hey, this is Chris West from House Calls Vermont, and we're going to have a weekly episode where we're going to do a little bit of looking at this house I've been renovating. I bought this house 3.5 years ago, and I've been slowly chipping away. House has two parts. It's got a brick part, and it has a wood frame part over here to your right. And each of those is going to be having a different treatment. The house itself is from the 1830s. So we've got some very old stuff. The fascinating thing to start with is that this brick building is older than the wood building. The wood building was built as what we call in Vermont a summer kitchen, which is after spending 7 months in this house, which is only 4 or 5 rooms, the family needed to have somewhere else to live. So they had a 3-season attachment, a wood frame attachment. We'll take a close look at that in a minute. But that attachment is where they would spend the entire summer. There was even a hole in the back of the chimney for the kitchen fireplace that allowed for a fireplace or a wood stove to be put in that part. We'll take a look inside now. And then we won't have any real issues with the sound. So here we are, we're inside the brick part of the house. I've completely gut renovated it. I'll put a couple of shots up of what it looked like originally. This room, when I first bought the place, had a thick shag red carpet and had groovy 1970s wallpaper, which I think I may actually have a bit left somewhere. So this is the part of the house that, as I said, is brick. The problem with this brick is that I want to insulate it. I want to make the house more energy efficient. And I've got, a foot of brick here. A foot of brick is about an R1, maybe a R1.5. Brick itself does not have a very good thermal resistance, R value to it. It's very good at staying up. It's very good at moving moisture through it, but we want to insulate this. And because of the type of brick it is, I'm going to have to insulate it on the outside. If I was to insulate it on the inside, what happens is the freezing point of the brick moves inside the brick. So normally your house is actually heating the brick up, keeping it from the water that's in it from freezing and causing what's called spalling, which is the breaking off of the brick or the crumbling of the brick. And so insulating to the inside would actually cool the first quarter of an inch, half inch of the brick down below the freezing point, and that would cause spalling. So this would just make the building degrade. We've got some great stuff here. The floor upstairs is made of a rough sawn 3-inch plank that runs 25 feet from end to end. So this is, it's amazing. So here, take a quick look here. This is the floor. We've got a plank, rough sawn plank, probably sawn at the sawmill down at the Falls in Essex, and that is running the entire width of the house. There is no beam supporting it, although we're installing them. Don't fall, no, don't die. So this is what I mean there. What we're gonna do is we're gonna be putting 4 of these in place. They're jacked up and we'll be supporting the floor evenly here. We're gonna have one about here as well, next to the chimney, going across, and that will make sure that it's not too bouncy upstairs, because it gets a bit bouncy, and it'll make sure that we have a good support for that entire second floor, whatever they're gonna be putting up there. Okay, and then here's that fireplace I was talking about. This fireplace is the original kitchen fireplace. You can see we have brick here and a nice wood framing of that brick. There originally would have been just a fire in here in the 1830s, 1840s, and then at some point they would have put in a wood stove, very much like the wood stove we have inside, although the one we have is from the 20s. So in the summertime, they would leave this building and come inside here. So this is the summer kitchen, and it's pretty common that old houses in Vermont have summer kitchens, and they've almost all been taken from being a 3-season to being a 4-season structure, so they've added heat and whatnot. It's a wood beam construction. Some of the beams are hand hewn. That the marks from the adze is still to be seen, or the hewing axe. And we are doing some renovating here. I took all the walls off. I'll also show you pictures of what was going on in this. This was 2 rooms. The stairs going upstairs were there, and over here we had 2 rooms as well. It's much nicer as an open space, though. I think it works well. The plan here, we'll get into that in another episode, but I wanted to just introduce you to the project. So we've got 2 very different types of structures that we're going to be insulating and making airtight and making super insulated for who will be living here after we're done with the renovation. The brick one and the wood frame one. And we'll talk about the building science decisions behind why we're doing what on each of those assemblies. And until next week, this is just episode 1 out of probably 10 or 15 episodes. So you have a good rest of your day, and just remember, building science knowledge is what House Calls Vermont is all about. Great, perfect. I can talk. Okay, so we're at 10 Old Stage again, and just wanted to show you from the back side what we have here. So we've got the brick part you can see over there. That brick part is being covered with plywood, and I'll go over that in just a minute, why we're doing that. I've got these big bundles of factory second polyiso. This was all going to be thrown into a landfill somewhere, so I was able to get it inexpensively and save that from going into a landfill, which is preferable. So I just want to do a look at the building from the side, and I'll show you some early pics when we get back to the house. But that part right there with the porch on the front and the garage on the side, that's the wood part that we were in before. And behind there is a wooden structure built on top of the original brick. Originally the brick was a cape, and I took down the the gable cheeks and built a pony wall, a 6-foot pony wall from the top of the floor there to the 8-foot mark, which is what I want for height. And now what we're doing is we're looking at insulating the brick. And I was just talking about how insulating the brick is an issue, because when you insulate brick, you have the ability or the possibility that changing where the freezing point is in the brick can create spalling, that flaking off of the front of the brick. And we want to avoid that at all cost. So what I decided to do, which a lot of people have an issue with, is I'm putting the insulation on the outside. And that maintains the brick on the inside for the people who are living in it, but we'll have a completely different outside look. This building was never listed on historical register. This is completely legal. There's nothing wrong with me doing this from a legal point of view. There are some aesthetic things people can talk about having issues with, and I'm fine with that. What I want the structure to last well into the next century and not use a lot of energy to do it. So that's my plan, and the way to do that is to either not insulate it at all or insulate to the outside. So I'm insulating to the outside. 5.5 inches of polyiso is somewhere between 36 and 40, an R36 or 40. So that's what we're looking at getting here. You can add the R1 1.5 of the brick, and the brick gets thinner as it goes up. It's a step thing. You've got a rubble wall on the bottom, and then you've got these thick planks sitting on a ledge, and it goes up to the next floor, and it steps in 1 brick width, and then it steps up, and then it's 2 bricks width. So it's 3 and then 2 bricks width on top of a rubble wall, what we call rubble, so a stone wall. So what we're doing here right now is we're installing the window bucks, and the window bucks will be holding the high performance windows that I've ordered from Wythe Windows, who we interviewed this week for our show. And I just wanted to show you the plan here, right? So what we're doing is we're building these window bucks out of 3/4 inch plywood, and we're cementing them or mortaring them in place. Cement on the bottom because the thickness was just too much for mortar to do a good job with. It needs a thicker aggregate. And then we're bolting 3/4 inch plywood on the side of the building, and that's what we're seeing here. This is the first row at this height. We have 1 more row above it, and when we first put the pony wall up, because it's just a 2x4 wall on top of a cap there, is that my builder friend Andy Leach from Leach Construction said you might want to put hurricane ties down, so the wood structure will be not only bolted onto the top couple of courses, but it will actually be bolted to the floor. And I came up with an alternative that makes it much easier to hang this particular plywood and then the insulation off of it, is that I'm using these straps and I'm hanging the entire thing off of the wood structure. So when you see up there where the old plywood is, it goes up another 1.5 feet almost, and that is nailed into the wood structure. So that's all hanging on top of it. In order for the wood structure to be blown off at this point would take quite a lot of force. So what we're doing right now is we're adding this 3/4 inch PT plywood. We're bolting it onto the side using Tapcons, and then we're going to be putting on the 5.5 inches of rigid insulation, and that's all going to go across. It's going to come out, and then we're going to double strap. We're going to do a horizontal strap, a vertical strap, and then a horizontal strap. The vertical strap is for the rain screen, the venting screen, and the horizontal is because I'm going to be doing a shiplap or board and batten type exterior, locally sawn hemlock wood, and I think it's going to be a shiplap. So it'll look very much like the barn over there, and should just fade into the rest of the world here. I have a where you see the tape up there, that's actually another window opening. There's no buck there yet. We're going to do one side and then another and another. But by Thursday, we should be able to hang the rest of these pieces of plywood, and then we can start putting
Gotta wake it back up
on the outside, and that's where it gets really exciting. This is Chris West from House Calls Vermont. Until next time. So there you go. That's me talking about a report on what's going on at 10 Old Stage, which is a house I bought about 4 years ago, and have been slowly but surely renovating with lots of advice from Jim, to be perfectly honest, and other builder friends. It seems as if I got the settings wrong for the YouTube live, and the first part was not sending out live, but it is completely there. You're able to click on it and go back and watch the entire discussion about building material prices and scarcity, and what Jim and I think about all of those bits. So please feel free to go back and take a look at that. And now we're going to just go in and start the interview with Darren Macri. So Darren is the owner of Wythe Windows, and Jim and I interviewed him yesterday. Hi, this is Chris West with House Calls Vermont, and today we're going to be interviewing Darren Macri, who's the co-owner of Wythe Windows, super insulated window manufacturer in New Jersey, who's making a German style or a European style triple glazed tilt and turn window, and we want to know more about it. So Darren, welcome to House Calls Vermont. Tell us a little about your company and why you set it up.
Chris, it's my pleasure, and thank you, Jim. It's an honor to be with you both, and lovely to always talk about high performance windows.
Great. No, it's just that when we're trying to do an assembly, there's so many different schools of thoughts on why windows are important. Sometimes it's just, okay, I'm going to see through it. I want to get ventilation, of course. And I want the cheapest price point. Most of the times those are the consideration. When we get into the high performance side, though, especially since the high performance window is such a necessary component for the assembly, especially as we're building homes tighter, and there is a higher moisture concentration possibly inside the house just from living and cooking and cleaning and everything else, and then you get the big temperature differentials from inside and outside. Our concern is not just, hey, what was the cheapest price that I could get for a window at the big box store, or what was the prettiest window that I could possibly get at the highest price point, or do I actually have to go overseas and spend a lot more money, especially when shipping containers now are $8,000 each to get one of those across the ocean? You know, what am I going to do locally, and what's going to be available for really the best type of window? And you know what we found, Darren, your windows are really fitting that bill for us. And if you could tell us a little bit about that, some of the concerns you've seen with just a regular double hung window, the regular type of windows that are offered by even some of the big players out there currently, and how your windows might compare.
Wow, there's a lot in there, and thank you for saying that. I mean, our whole reason in being is to be here to support folks who want those higher performance windows, to make that aspect of their project a lot easier. And I often say that when you're looking at a window, it is the one point in your building envelope where all your layers of your building envelope come into one component. Certainly. So it's the visual of your siding on your window. It's your thermal envelope, so it's your insulation. It's your heating, so because you can get free solar heat gain from your window. It's your ventilation strategy. So
because we want to reduce infiltration, and these triple glazed tilt and turn windows are the least leaky of all the windows available. So one of the things we're trying to do with Passive House and other types of tight buildings is know where we're bringing our fresh air in, right? And one of the ways we don't want to be bringing our fresh air in is through gaps around our windows, which can bring moisture and load the walls with moisture, which can cause durability issues. But also, we don't want it coming through the walls. So the window to wall connection is really important. The window to window, how the operable part of the window interacts with the frame of the window. That's all really important when we're dealing with tight houses.
For sure. And you said something there and made me think of something, and now I forgot it.
That's okay. In the ecology of windows that we have in America. So if I was going to go as an unknowledgeable person, and I was going to go and try to buy some windows, my first choice would be to go to a big box store, right? Go to Lowe's, go to Home Depot, buy a gel win or some other not UPVC, but a straight up PVC window. And all of us have lived in houses with PVC windows. After, 5 or 6 years, they start drooping, they don't close right. As the off gassing happens with those windows, the solar gain sometimes can cause warping. So every time, if it comes out of the factory and it isn't a great window, after it's warped, it's like not getting better there right now.
Yeah.
Then the other option is to go to a Marvin showroom or a Pella showroom or an Andersen showroom and grab windows off the shelf. And those off the shelf windows have two very important aspects to them. One of them is that these companies have stock window sizes, right? Window sizes that if you buy that, there's no upcharge, right? They call that an upcharge for customized windows, right? One of the things that I love about your product and a lot of products of that type is that every one of these windows is a custom window. You don't have 5,000 windows of this size over in a warehouse over there, and so the architects have to build it to that thing. No, when I call you for windows, I say, Darren, here are the rough openings, minus a half inch on every side, and let's call that the window, and there's no upcharge for that. So and by the way, getting a thermally broken frame that's also got triple glazing in it is not something I can get at a good price point from a company like Pella or Marvin. I don't even think Andersen even offers a triple pane at this point. But those are things that I'm looking for. So when, as a passive house consultant, when someone says, well, what windows can I use? Well, there are a lot of things. We want to cut down on that condensation. Jim and I were just discussing this with you earlier before we started the interview. We were at a customer's house the other day for an audit, and he says, during the winter, I've got that stripe of condensation at the bottom of my window. How can I fix that? And I said, well, you could reduce the relative humidity in the house down to like 5%, and maybe that'll help. But nobody wants to live in a house with 5% relative humidity. You're going to be horribly uncomfortable. I said, the only thing you can do is replace the windows, and that wasn't a priority for him or for what the audit showed. So that's what we're looking for. Well, that's what we have as an ecology. That's what we can do without something like a triple glazed European window. And when we go to a triple glazed European window, until your company started, I had 4 or 5 choices, good choices, all in Europe, all requiring that I order them 6 months ahead of time, and that I pay, what Jim was just alluding to, a huge premium to have them shipped over, and the possibility that when they finally get to the shipping container finally gets to the port, that I have a 30-day, 2-month waiting as the process of bringing in products goes through the customs process. We have a very famous story of the Whitchurch house that they had to stop work on the house for 2 months while customs held up their window order in Boston. So these are all things.
Our company was born because of a similar problem, actually.
Well, tell us about that.
Well, I'm a passive house consultant, and I built New Jersey's very, very first internationally certified passive house. And I was working with a company that was an independent.
You can throw anyone under the bus you want to, by the way. It's okay.
Now, I was working with a company as their independent dealer, right? And I had my passive house building and consulting firm on the side, and then I was an independent dealer of these windows, and so I was using them for my passive house, and I waited, like you said, 16, 18 weeks for these windows to arrive. And I had a huge window wall in there, and they forgot to ship a tiny little piece that molds the windows together. And I had to wait another 16, 18 weeks for them to send that piece over. And I had a giant 20-foot opening in my envelope, and and I had to go through the winter with this, and it was incredibly frustrating and stagnating and costly. And they said, there's got to be a better way. I'm not the only person having this problem. And if we and you got a lot of good folks who want to build great buildings, and how are we going to support them? How are we going to grow this industry? How are we going to build buildings that are going to reduce our carbon levels? How are we going to make buildings and the occupants in them healthier? And we can't do this with this model of shipping over windows and not being able to support the product, not being able to make custom configurations because you got to, take a foreign language class to talk to the folks. and so here we're making them here, and we're able to, and as you say, our plant is fully automated. So I can make one window for you, or I can make 6,000 windows for you, all different sizes, makes no difference to us.
No, upset. I did want to just chime in and say there are people, having grown up in New Jersey myself, who would say that New Jersey is a foreign language. From Berkeley Heights originally, so.
Yeah, it is true, but if we were in Brooklyn, it'd be even worse, I guess.
Yeah. So that was the impetus. Tell us a little about what you did. You bought some European window frame making. Tell us about setting up the company and about what you had to do to make that work.
Well, there was a lot of investigation and a lot of studying that needed to go into the whole process before we even, turned on, made the website live and said, we're selling windows, because, you have a window is made up of three basic components: your frame, your profile, and your frame, which is your profile for your sash and your frame, your glass, and your hardware. And so three basic components, but then there's a lot of variations within those within each of those components. And so we had to investigate our vending partners that we wanted to work with. We had to investigate our different options that we wanted to use, and we had to put the whole recipe together of what would become our window. So our profile is extruded specifically to meet our climate here in North America. So if you're getting a window, a high performance tilt turn window from overseas, that's actually extruded, and that UPVC is mixed for that market, for that Northern European climate, which we all know is more temperate than our climate here in North America. I
just want to clarify, not North America, but New York and north, right? Because the Germany is like Washington, D.C. and this thin strip going over and up to Seattle, right? There is climate zone 4 here, and there's climate zone 2 and 3. But for when we're buying windows for thermal reasons, right? That's when we're looking at the climate zone 5, the climate zone 6, 7, 8, etc. So I think that's what you were referring to.
Absolutely, and our profile is suitable to go all the way down to the southern tip of Mexico, to the northernmost of Canada, and be UV and structurally stable. So we have to actually put additional stabilizers into the profile to make it suitable for all those different climate zones. And then we also investigated the different ways. You say you get a tilt turn window, it's not the same. Just like you would say with any double hung window, right? You have the big box store double hung window, and but you're going to pay twice the price if you go to get a Marvin or. And speaking of which, Jim laid out that question earlier. We should circle back to that. Is what are those differences? What are the advantages, and what are the drawbacks of those designs, double hung encasement windows and wide tilt turn? And so we should circle back on that.
Sure, we'll get to the benefits of or the difference between Wythe Windows and the other European UPVC and other types of frame and glazing packages, and how those impact design. But go on with the story about setting up your company.
So don't dive into the components just yet.
We'll get there. Don't worry. But I just want to get the story. So you saw a need, you got a partner, you investigated what to do, and you if I understand right, you bought machines to make the frames, and you also import your extrusions. You're not making your extrusions here, right?
Exactly. Yes. So I was building this passive house. It became widely known in the area of what I was doing, and this gentleman I knew in town, he and I started talking about different opportunities we could do together, and I suggested that windows, the passive house builders in the U.S. need support with windows, and they don't have a lot of options. And so then we started investigating, going to shows, learning about the different those three different components we talked about, and discussing with our vendors. Then at that point, when we decided what the recipe would be for our window, then we had to figure out, okay, well, how the heck are we going to make it? So we started with a very, very small semi-automated production line. And so there was a lot of handwork and measuring and such that had to go into this production line. And we could probably do about 75 windows a week with that line, right? But within our first few months of being in business, we saw the excitement and interest in what we were doing. And we immediately, reinvested and doubled down on everything we could, and got a fully automated production line. So it was before before a year was even up. So we got that fully automated production line, and on that line we went from being able to do 75 frames and in a week to being able to do 425 frames in 8 hours.
Wow.
And then now this year, we took over the space next to us, and we have doubled our footprint, and we're getting another automated line. And so by September, we will be able to do over 1,000 frames in 8 hours.
Wow. That's what we're talking about. Now you can really pump them out.
Oh, yeah.
So Darren, are you doing help me out with the actual components? Because I know for some, they either source some of the components and then do the assembling at their factory, or they'll do some of the extruding for the frame material and everything else. How are you approaching this at Wythe Windows?
So we have an extruder that we work with, and they extrude the profile for us, and they laminate the profile for us with a laminate that is warranted for North America. So unlike some products that you may get in from Europe, those will be laminated with a foil that's appropriate for Europe and not warranted here in the US. And so we have a 20-year warranty on the coloring from fading and delaminating. And then we use, so we get the sticks in. They're just long, 22-foot long sticks. And let's say if you were to order a window, I would design it in the computer. I could design it on my phone. I could design it on a tablet. I could send it to the machine, and then as long as somebody's at the machine to load the stick in, then the machine takes it and cuts it down and mills in all the holes for the hinges, mills in the holes for the handles. So the handle heights really come critically important, because we do also a lot of ADA work for senior living housing and such. And so we got to always be accurate about exactly where those handles are going to be. And so we eliminate all those possible human errors and mistakes. Those are all getting put in there automated. And so what we've designed in our computer system is what you're going to get. So you don't see the guys sitting there at the machine with paperwork like, now which side was the sash supposed to be on? Is the handle on the left, on the right? None of that's happening, because whatever you okayed is what's sent to the computer, and then boom, and that's what comes out. And then those sticks come out of the machine. So,
just for clarification, the sticks are the frame profile. They're these UPVC profiles.
UPVC steel reinforced profile. And I should also emphasize some of the things you don't see about our wood are some of the most important things, like that steel reinforcement. Is a lot of our competitors would use maybe a 1.5 millimeter L steel reinforcement, and we use a 2 millimeter U-channel steel reinforcement. And so we want to not only be thermally resistant, but we want to be resistant to the test of time. You need to get the most out of these windows for a long time, and I don't want you to have trouble operating them or any sort of movement in the window. And that's how, with that great steel reinforcement, we're able to get an AW60 rating, which means we can go into a high-rise building 30 stories, and no matter whether you're a single family home or a high-rise building, you're still going to get that same configuration, and that so you have that you can trust that you're getting that strength.
And that U profile, if I remember correctly, it has a U value of 0.1416.
So the frame has a UF value. So this is just the frame area of 0.17,
right.
And then we typically use a glass of 0.12, and that's where you get kind of the UW of 0.14, 15, 16, depending on your frame to glass ratio. So the size of the window. So if you have more glass area, your U value will go down, meaning higher performing. Or if you have more frame area, your U value will go up, meaning lower performing.
Right. And that's what we see, that huge difference in overall U value, or R value, as a lot of Americans are used to talking about. A good Pella is topping out at an R4, and your window kind of starts at an R6 and goes up to an R7. And a lot of people don't know, but the inside surface temperature of the frame and the glazing is what comfort means for a window, right? That's why in houses that have crappy windows, like an R2 and R3, even an R4 window, they put radiators under the windows because they are just not good enough for the surface temperatures not to cause comfort issues in those coldest days.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And you'll see in passive houses that they eliminate the lengths of their ductworks because they're able to count on those windows being high performing. And so people often think, I'm getting a lot of air leakage from my window. And you probably are, especially if you have a double hung window with 1 or 2 locking points, and just a brush, that's stopping the air infiltration. But it's not only air infiltration that gives you that feeling of air movement. It's also convection looping. So you can be sitting on your couch, and you can have asymmetrical heat loss. So your heat is now radiating being pulled from the to the window,
because of the cold surface temperature.
Yes. Yep. And then that could start a convection loop. And so it feels like you have a breeze, and you can, and you feel very uncomfortable in a passive house.
We've described that to our viewers before. We call that cold fall, where because of the lower temperature of the surface of the glazing and or the frame, air hits it, and when it hits it, it cools, and then colder air is heavier, so it falls down, and that even if there's no wind coming through your window, you can still feel like there's a draft, even though that draft is not being caused by the outside.
Exactly. Well said. Thank you. And yeah, and that's one of the beauties of passive house design and our windows. They're going to eliminate, I think they're gonna eliminate that feeling. And I think we have become so accustomed in our homes to being uncomfortable, to being bullied by our houses. I'm gonna put the
That's a new term. Wait a second. Getting bullied by my house. I love it. I'm taking that one with me.
But it feels that way, right? I mean, you don't even know the things that you accept without realizing it. I got to put the plastic over my windows, and those little snakes or caterpillars, that they make them look all cute, and you put them around your doors because you're leaking air from your thresholds. I mean, all the little the throws we keep around on our couches,
right,
wrap ourselves up with. It's crazy.
Yeah.
The things that we do to keep ourselves comfortable, and then the complicated systems we put on top of that. Well, I mean, let's stop worrying about making, a smart home. Let's make, let's dumb down all the pieces, and use, smart design.
Smart. Passive design, things that don't move after you install them. A little more expensive to begin with, but overall you don't have to add energy to them to have them perform, which is what we're trying to move away from, for sure. So Darren, we have the factory. The factory now has you just ordered more stuff, right? So now you're really bumping up that production. You are right now, we spoke a little while ago about increasing the R value of the glazing, the U value, because you're at about a 0.12, but we know that there are options where we can get down to like a 0.088 on some of those glazings. So give us an update on how those discussions are going.
Yeah, and I would say inversely too, we also can value engineer our product to make it extremely affordable so we're going into affordable housing in the city and NYCHA, and then we're also providing passive house quality windows to movie stars and clients with very specific thermal targets. So it's very versatile, and it's one of the great things about having your own factory, being able to innovate for your customers' needs and being able to deliver on those needs. In terms of increasing the performance of the window, there are other glass packages that we can configure. I configure all the glass packages in-house. So if you have thermal targets that you need to meet, or priorities that you need to meet, that we can weigh out those different priorities and come up with a design to fit that model.
Okay, so now this is the question that I asked the first time we met, which is now almost 4 years ago, at one of the Better Building by Design 3-4 years ago. We were in Boston for Passive House conference as well. What are the costs? So I know that Jim and I are both very excited about that part of it, because your windows, with all of the benefits, being made nearby, custom windows without upcharge, an R6 and R7 window, you're coming in at the price that Pella and Marvin are coming in for, like their baseline, not custom window.
That's right. Yeah. And we're proud to do that. That's our goal, is to make these affordable, to get them into as many homes as possible, so that we can make as many homes as comfortable and as energy efficient. Okay. And we're very proud to do so. That's our goal, is to make this product as affordable and as accessible to as many people as possible. We want to bring down the carbon that our buildings are producing, and we have to do that by lowering our heating and cooling demand. And one of the key ways of doing that is through windows.
Yeah.
And we are here to support you and your projects, and we're excited to do it.
So how can people get in touch with you? What's the best way for them to reach out to you and get a quote? What's that process like?
You can go to our website, wythewindows.com. That's W-Y-T-H-E windows.com. You can email me personally at Darren, D-A-R-R-E-N, at wythewindows.com. And you can call the office, 201-962-7444. We have estimators standing by.
Well, Darren, these are always... Yeah, go ahead.
Chris,
go ahead, Jim.
Real quick here. One thing we didn't really touch on, and I know we're very short on time, is the fact that my takeaway from this is, this is all about new construction. And in reality, it really isn't, because that whole thing, that component that we kind of talked about, but went over and beyond, was the fact that every window is a custom window. Yeah. So if you have a 100-year-old house, you can still use these windows. And the nice thing about it is you don't have to pay a custom fee for, custom size fee, and you can get something for the older buildings. So consider this for replacement at the same time, because of what's there is what I would say. Would you agree, sir?
All right. Thank you so much for bringing that up, Jim. Absolutely. I would say over half our business is replacement.
Great.
Because basically,
I just bought a whole truckload of replacement windows for my retrofit. So.
Thank you. Yeah, because think of it, with an American flange window, that's difficult to replace, right? But no flange, just pop it right in. And we have details, and we're here to help you make sure you get the best install out of that window, no matter whether it's a replacement or new construction.
Great. Well, Darren, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk to us. Hopefully, we'll do a couple, when I get those windows and we put them in the bucks in my house, we'll do an install video and share that with our listeners, but also make sure that you and your people can get that. And we'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you so much. Good to see you both.
Bye.
Good.
Bye.
Hey, it's Chris and Jim. We're back. That was the interview with Darren Macri of Wythe Windows. Please feel free to reach out if you have a project, if you are a builder and you are in the process of getting prices for windows. Just go to Wythe Windows, W-Y-T-H-E windows.com, and send Darren a window schedule and let him price it out. You'll be really surprised at the price point. And if you need to look at windows, if you're in the Jericho or the Burlington area and you're a builder or just a consumer and you're interested in looking at these windows and the quality, get in touch with us at housecallsvt@gmail.com and we'll set up a site visit. You can come to one of our building sites and we'll let you take a look at the windows and get an idea of the quality. They're very high quality.
They don't leak from day one like many other windows.
No leaky from day one is the big ad there. So Jim, there we go. That's show 3 in the can. Again, everybody, I apologize for the technical difficulties. I'm doing all the technical work behind the scenes here, so the learning curve is working, and I appreciate your patience with us. Next week, we'll be talking about a topic. We haven't decided what the topic is yet. We have a couple of interviews that we're hoping to throw up there. One of Dave Carroll from Rice Lumber, one of Scott Dion from that Timber HP, the new insulation, wood-based insulation material that's being produced up at an old paper factory in Maine. And more updates from the 10 Old Stage Road. And Jim and I are also going to be putting up some video of us doing energy audits. So lots more to come. Please, if you have a question or interested in getting in touch with us about what's going on in your life, whether you're a builder and are interested in building science help, or if you're a homeowner or a renter and you want to know more about any of the topics we've covered, just drop us a line. Once again, that is housecallsvt@gmail.com. Until next week, this is Chris West.
And Jim Bradley.
Have a good rest of your week.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye. And we're out.
Okay.
Okay, Jim. Time to go eat dinner.
All right, man.
Okay, I'll see you. I'll talk to you tomorrow, I'm sure.
You got it.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.